Greetings to all. Today we are going to talk about feminist perspective. The topic will be divided in the following parts. At first, we will see the introduction, then origin, then waves of feminism, then main elements of feminism, then we go with the different schools of feminism, after that recent trends, and then summary. So, we start with the introduction. This topic is very important in the present phenomena. Essentially, a political movement, feminism, is a multifaceted phenomenon. In a generic sense, it stands for a distinctive theoretical orientation towards political, social, and economic equality of the sexes and organized activity to promote women's rights and interests. Feminism refers to a mode of thought that is concerned with the condition of women in society, the causes of their suffering and deprivation, and the measures for restoring their due position with a fair share in prestige, power, and wealth. Feminism emerged as a political movement on belief in equality of women and men, committed to the elimination of gender-based injustices. Many of these injustices have been institutionalized in laws and public policies that patently discriminated against women. Specific rights, for example, right to vote, or immunities, privileges, and opportunities were granted to men and systematically denied to women. So, now we go on the origin of the concept. This concept of feminism is a very recent phenomena and needs a lot of importance. Now we go to the origin. Feminism is one of the most recent ideologies to emerge, although its origin can be traced far back into history. Early feminism emerged in the wake of the Enlightenment, which sought to enlarge the scope of rights of men so as to include equal rights for women therein. In Britain, free thinking women like Mary Wollstonecraft and Harriet Taylor made a fervent appeal for equal rights of women. Mary Wollstonecraft's famous essay, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, is regarded as a milestone in feminist literature. Harriet Taylor was the wife of John Stuart Mill and his co-author in his celebrated work on liberty. Being impressed of her talent, J.S. Mill in his essay on the subjection of women argued that women were by no means less competent than men and hence they deserved equal rights with men. Here I would like to say that J.S. Mill was the main thinker of the liberalism and liberal philosophy, and his contribution in the ideas of democracy and equal rights of men and women was very important. Now we come to the waves of feminism. Basically grown and developed in the Western socio-cultural milieu, feminist movement has passed through successive stages of evolution. Feminist trend originally arose at the end of the 18th century. It gained momentum in the 19th and 20th centuries when it took the form of several waves and flowed in different directions. Now we come to the first wave of feminism, and the first wave of feminism, which arose in late 19th century and lasted up to the early part of the 20th century, concentrated upon either achieving political representation or social emancipation of women. J.S. Mill in his book The Subjection of Women supported those rights greatly. Influenced by his wife Harriet Taylor, Mill argued that women should have equal rights with men based on equal reason and education and equal right to work and to vote. A National Women's Suffrage Association was set up in 1869 to advance these rights. Political campaigns by women began later in Britain, but in 1903 the Women's Social and Political Union was formed to fight for female suffrage. So was born the suffragette movement. The results, however, were not entirely satisfactory. The extension of franchise did not dramatically increase female participation in political life. Women also remained worse off than men, especially in wages and job opportunities, and it was left to the second wave to analyze why this should be so and what was to be done. So, in the first wave the main focus was on the political rights of women, and now we come to the second wave of feminism. A radically new development occurred in the 1960s and 1970s, the so called second wave of feminism, inspired by such writers as Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex, and Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique. Kate Millett wrote Sexual Politics, and the most famously Germaine Greer, The Female Itch. It came as an explosion in America and then spread across the world. It shifted the entire debate from what might be generally considered political to the psychological, cultural and anthropological fields. Some second wave feminists argued for greater inclusion of women on the grounds of female moral superiority. In Britain, a great deal of legislation has been introduced to advance the cause of greater gender equality. Abortion law, divorce law reform, Equal Pay Act, Sex Discrimination Act, Employment Protection Act and Domestic Violence Act. However, there has been very limited progress in dealing with the forces of structural gender inequality in society, and enforcement of legislation is weak. So, in the second wave, it was a better wave and better position for women, because these authors like Betty Friedan, Greer and Millett, they changed its shift to psychological and moral reasons, and these fields, anthropological and cultural fields also. Now we come to the third wave of feminism. The third wave of feminism or new feminism is in fact a continuation of the second wave beginning from the early 1990s. It focuses on the perceived failures of the second wave of feminism and to consolidate what had been achieved. A number of issues of gender discrimination remain to be addressed. Female pay in Britain remains on average around 75% of male wages. Women are more likely to be found in low paid, part time, low status, insecure, low skilled and temporary work than men. A great deal of gender inequality still exists in modern societies. There are a number of changes to be considered. Women's lives cannot be just in terms of oppression or inequalities addressed by politics. Women have new forms of power in work, politics and the media available to them to redress general inequalities. Besides, women do not need a feminist movement as such to advance their interests. They should see themselves as agents and not as victims within the existing social system. So, this third wave of feminism, this was which started in 1990s, focused on the failures of second wave and the new phenomena that the women should be paid equal wages, and these laws in favor of women, they empowered the women. Now we come to the main elements of feminist thought. This is a very important part because it is the main theoretical part. So, the feminism requires an analysis of the power relations between men and women in all areas of society. One can see this in a number of areas. The first important area is the sex, gender and sexism. The second one is public and private spheres of life, and the third, the most important, is the patriarchy. Now we come to the first part, the sex, gender and sexism. Now in this, for the most, feminist biological distinctions were of very minor significance. What was significant was gender. This is a social construct, a cultural phenomenon that assigned different roles to women and a whole apparatus of imposed behavior patterns, expectations, thoughts, aspirations and even dreams. It is not biological or natural that women should take the bulk of child care responsibilities. This has occurred as a result of social and cultural developments that should be changed to the benefit of women, and most feminists believe in. Now this is the most practical part, because women are made responsible for this child rearing, and this is a social and cultural development from centuries. But the feminist thinkers, they say that this should be changed and the responsibilities should be divided between men and women. Now sexism is an ideology of oppression of one gender over another that promotes the idea that genderized, socialized relations between men and women are natural and biological and unable to be changed. Sexism in society is male and directed towards the subjugation and exploitation of women. This exploitation can be economic or sexual or physical. This is an ideology of imperialism of men over women and reflects the power relations between men and women in society, with men having control over most forms of power. And practically we see that the men are having control over all the major areas of the society. For example, politics is the main, and then the financial and economic field, and women are not being able to cope up with their all responsibilities and their work with the household keeping and child rearing. Now we come to the public and private spheres. Feminists boldly asserted that there was no such public-private distinction, and the most intimate dimensions of such relationships had profound political consequences. Moreover, the politically powerful public sphere dominated by men impacted on the politically weak private sphere still dominated by men, but within which the lives of women were confined. If women were to be truly equal with men, then there would need be female emancipation within both the private sphere and the public sphere. Perhaps men or the state have a greater role in child rearing, releasing women for a greater role in public sphere. Perhaps there would be a wage for the work done by women in private sphere. Now the third one is the patriarchy, and this patriarchy is the mainspring of feminism. This patriarchy, or the rule by men, permeates all aspects of society, public and private, as well as language and intellectual discourse. It thus remains the most powerful of all tyrannies, the most ancient of all hierarchies. The root of oppression rests in men's superior strength and greater brutality, together with the female terror of being raped and the patriarchal ideologies that enslave minds. One of the most important ideological props of patriarchy is religion. Patriarchy is thus a social construct and not a natural condition. Women's movement therefore seek liberation from patriarchy by various means ranging from specific political campaigns to consciousness raising by debate and discussions and publications, or simply living the future, adopting a liberated lifestyle and related values and sharing these with the sisterhood. So, patriarchy is the main area where feminism attacks. It remains because the male ego and the powerful of all his thinking, man's superior strength and greater brutality. So, it is the terror of the women that they will be oppressed, they will be raped, or they will be beaten by their male family members. So, this patriarchy is in the social setup of all the areas of the world. So, now we come to the schools of feminism. Now, the feminism is an ideology with a difference. This makes it peculiarly difficult to analyze and criticize in the terms usually applied to ideologies. Over a century of feminist thought and politics in different parts of the world has produced a rich body of work. The conventional analysis of feminist thought has tended to group it into four major streams. These four major streams they show the different areas of feminism or different perspectives of feminism or feminist thought. The first one is the liberal feminism, then the second one is the socialist feminism, then conservative feminism and radical feminism. Now, first we come to the liberal feminism. This liberal feminism represents the earliest in feminist thought. It seeks amelioration of in the condition of women in pursuance of the policy of liberalism. It advocates suitable reforms in the liberal institutions already existing in Western countries. It opposes any revolutionary change. Again, this Mary Wollstonecraft and J.S. Mill were early liberal feminists, and among the contemporary exponents of liberal feminism is Betty Friedan, who was American writer and activist, to enable women to combine effectively professional careers and family responsibilities. Carol Petman, who wrote The Sexual Contract, is widely known for her synthesis of conceptual problems in liberal democratic theory with the theory of patriarchal basis of sexual politics. So, this is the first school, the liberal feminism, and it wants to make the women more liberal, more free, and to choose their life as they want to lead. The second one is the socialist feminism. Socialist feminism links women's oppression to the class society. It holds that here capitalist as well as men are the beneficiaries of women's subordination. Establishment of socialism is therefore the necessary condition of women's emancipation. Utopian socialists like Charles Fourier, Saint Simon, Robert Owen stood for a version of socialism that would be based on equality of men and women. Fourier envisaged a highly permissive sexual environment with women liberated from the burdens of child care and the housework by transforming most of these family functions to the community. Frederick Engels, co-founder of Marxism, provided a classic account of the origin of gender inequality in his book The Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State, and hoped that arrival of socialism would abolish both private property and domestic servitude of women. Sheila Robotham, who wrote Women, Resistance and Revolution, the contemporary representatives of the school advocated a participatory decentralized approach to social change that contemplates linking of the struggle of all oppressed groups. Now, this socialist feminism is different from other schools because it is related to the socialist philosophy or communism, and these authors like Saint Simon or Robert Owen and even Frederick Engels, they wanted the equality of all the classes and even with the women also. Now we come to the third one, conservative feminism. Conservative feminists take the view that women should have sovereignty within their own spheres of life. Cultural manifestations of this approach, such as the strict desk dress code of many Islamic countries, may appear repressive, but in reality, this strengthens respect for women and their freedom. The family life is a very important and respected sphere of female activity and fulfillment. Many conservative feminists argue that too much feminist theory attacks the vital role of women in child rearing and home making. Indeed, many women actually want to be family centered and find deep fulfillment there rather than in careers and salary works in the public sphere. Some feminist writers such as Jean Baptiste Alhestein in Public Man and Private Woman book have evolved a variation of these views and claim that women's life experience, for example, of motherhood has nourished values such as cooperation, tenderness and sensitivity that have universal application. Here I would like to say that this conservative feminism is different from the last two schools because they are not so intense in their philosophy, and they advocate the traditional role of women in the society, in the family life and in their original roles that were in the past. Now comes the radical feminism. This is the last one, the most recent and most interesting form of feminism, and it is the radical feminism focuses on all pervading male domination in society and calls for overturning of gender oppression. Although it arose in mid 20th century, its early hints are found in the writings of Virginia Woolf. She was very popular author. She was English novelist and essayist. In her famous essay, A Room of One's Own, Woolf dwelled on how men socially and physically dominate women. Simone de Beauvoir, she was a French novelist and the author of the book The Second Sex, argued that the dependent derivative status of women as the other of men was the product of an upbringing in society. She asserted, a woman is not born but made. Another prominent exponents of radical feminism are Shulamit Firestone, Kate Millett, who exercised enormous influence on developing the women's liberation movement. Millett in her Sexual Politics argued that relationship between the sexes was based on the power and further sustained by an ideology. Hence, it should be treated as political relationship. This radical feminism is the most popular form in the present times, and the writing of Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own, she has criticized the male domination in society, and she wants to turn off the gender discrimination, gender oppression, and a better role for women in the society. Now we come to the recent trends in the field of feminist perspective. Contemporary feminist theory seeks to evolve a new critical perspective so as to enlarge and transform its focus of study. Susan M. Okin, in her noted work Women in Western Political Thought, observed that generally speaking the great tradition of political philosophy consisted of writings by men, for men and about men. Contemporary feminist writers have pointed out that male heads of household derive their power to make wars, laws and philosophy from the fact that others work for them in private. In fact, the glory in the public sphere is derived from the exploitation and repression in the private sphere. Annie Phillips, in her noted work on engendering democracy, forcefully argued that the public and private spheres must be treated as interdependent. Phillips argued that to conceptualize democratic participation without considering the constraints faced by the women in the sphere would end up in a very narrow view of democracy. So, in the last, we come to the summary. Feminism is a relatively new ideology dating for all practical purposes from the late 18th century. Three waves of feminism can be detected. The key target of feminism is patriarchy, male domination in all its myriad forms. Feminism significantly denies the boundaries between the private and public spheres. It insists on including the analysis of the causes and remedies of subordination of women in all the spheres of life. In the contemporary world, for the advancement in technology, diversification of business industry, administration, arts and professions, and the increasing demand of new skills and talents, professional competence have given women opportunity of proving their abilities. It is now realized that women are fit to perform most of the jobs that men do and for which they were not considered fit earlier. So, in the concluding remarks, we can say that feminism is a new but practical ideology and they have practical purposes because they want to change the life of women from the long suppressive lives of women. They want to liberate them and to work in all the spheres of life as equal as men, because there is no difference between men and women psychologically, mentally, ethically and in all the areas. So, with this we conclude this lecture. Thank you so much.